Hello! Welcome to my first ever video on... well, I've been thinking for a while about something to do on this game, Robot Rumble 2.0. And I've also been thinking about ways that you might be able to classify fighting robots, besides just what weapon they use. And what I've come up with, it's not particularly polished yet, but is a system of 8 stats that you can use. I've listed them in the description as well, of damage, reach, control, pushing, defense, flipping, mobility and precision. And the idea is not that they're actually used to indicate how good the robot is at something, but to indicate how much the design prioritises it. And I thought I'd make my first video building a robot based on that concept, and this is the correct version of the game. You didn't see that first attempt at recording, it's fine. And also linked in the description is Twitchy, a YouTuber and streamer who actually gave me these this selection of stats to build a robot based on. The idea is that you take the 8 stats and you have 8 points to assign to those stats, and that based on those 8 points, you're forced to either specialise the robot into particular things, or to leave it vulnerable to everything. And Twitchy's stats that he gave me put 2 points into damage, reach and mobility, 1 point each into control and defense. So what that means is effectively that the robot, well, that there are particular limits on what this robot can really be, because, well, it's quite a specific set of things. Yeah, put my tongue back in. It's quite a specific set of stats for the robot, and it's quite an unusual one. You're not normally going to see much in the way of control as a backup for a robot that also wants ranged damage, because ranged damage usually means a bar of some description, or just generally a spinner. And so what I'm thinking for the Twitchinator is to make... I'm thinking of making a robot that's essentially, well, just a fairly conventional bar spinner bot, with the spinner mounted on top rather than in the front, but give it a pushing wedge on the back here, and I'm also going to put the weapon on a gear rather than a belt to give it realistically, that'd give it better ability to change speed quickly, so that I can then crank the torque up and make that weapon actually make the weapon change direction so that you can use it to control the opponent when they're on the front. Actually, that does actually make the wedge at the back feel a tad redundant. I'm probably actually going to pull that in so that the wheels can stick out slightly at the back to give it an option if it gets inverted, so that it can try and use arena hazards to right itself, or at the very least just not be immobile. And so I think that is about it. This is good collision mesh, everything's in place. And so the first thing that we need, of course, is going to be the weapon motor. Because, well, for fairly obvious reasons, you do need some means of driving your weapon. I've made the chassis not tall enough, one sec. This is going to be a bit of a rambly video, sorry about that. But I'm entirely new to this thing, so don't exactly have any of the experience involved in keeping things succinct. But what I'm hoping is that the robot itself and this whole points concept might be interesting enough to keep a few people around to the end of the video. How close is that to the top of the robot? Fairly close. See, I'm trying not to be cheaty or anything. I'm trying to avoid clipping things, which is going to make it quite difficult to get the tilt. I'm only going to be able to get a little bit. And pull that back away from the front wedge a little bit. So there we have the weapon motor. Drive motor's going to need to be narrower. There really isn't going to be a huge amount of space in this robot for batteries. But, well, there should be enough space for batteries. It's just going to be quite compact. There's not going to be wasted. Yeah, there's not going to be wasting of space going on. And I'm beginning to feel like I may have made this chassis too small. Just something about it is giving me that suspicion. Something about the complete lack of any real room to put things. But, thinking about it, if I add that wedge back onto the rear of the robot, then can use it. It can be used as a defensive implement, essentially, to whack to well, to do box rushes and such against other spinners if necessary. And it can just be a two-wheel drive bot. It sacrifices the possibility of making it invertible, but I mean, to an extent, that's not too much of a problem, because, well, the no, that's the wrong. Well, it isn't too much of a problem, because at the end of the day, it is still a bar spinner with the bar on top. That shouldn't be too difficult to use to right itself. And, with that second motor attached, we're not far from being at the appropriate point to add batteries. Not second motor, second gearbox. Okay, let's see. Can I fit a LiPo in here? No, I'm going to have to change the chassis shape again, which is of course going to mean having to rearrange everything lengthways again. On the plus side though, at least this game allows you to do that, which is already a step up over the previous games in its genre. But now, after that small change, I have enough space in the back to actually give it a decent amount of power to run that weapon off. And yeah, obviously the amount of power that it has is not yet an actual concern in the game. The power is completely irrelevant at the moment. Batteries are just dead weight. But A, future-proofing, and B, it'd be a bit cheaty to build a robot that relies completely on not having to have a battery. And I don't like building cheaty robots. That's... no, I need not 5. Just to get that off the floor without sticking out of the top. Protect it better. And just basically I'm getting the boring stuff, sticking all of the batteries in it and all of that out of the way as quickly as possible. Sticking the electronics in so that we can get to the interesting bits, the weapon and the actual using it in battle. How big wheels do we want? Oh, if I pull the motors back just slightly. Then we can fit 6-inch wheels, which will... no, that's... now that I think about it, I'm not just looking at how much drive there is, I'm looking at how much ground clearance there is. And I want there to be enough ground clearance that it doesn't get stuck. Like, you know, on opponents' wedges and stuff, but little enough ground clearance that it's less likely to end up on those wedges. And from the look of things, 5-inch wheels are probably... How big is the 4-inch wheel? No, the 4-inch wheel doesn't stick out far enough. I can change the height on these to make a bit of a difference. Let's try that. And so here we have the drivetrain of the robot, which should work nicely. It's already 41 kilos just from the internals, which personally I think is always a good thing with a spinner bot, because the heavier the rest of the robot is, it gives you a good indicator of how much it's going to rely on its weapon, and especially for a robot that has been set up with priorities beyond just its weapon. It's got to be mobile as well. That is a pretty important aspect. Just occurred to me before I forget. The Twitchinator. It's yeah, the name selected by Twitchy. Just going to give it a quick test to make sure that I haven't messed things up. Okay, well that is the wrong way around. And well, the friction is far too high right now because it's made of MDF, and the body is too light to keep the wheels on the ground properly, but it does drive in the correct direction. So, well, that's good enough for me, and that fits really quite nicely in the body there. But now we're on to the big important bit, the weapon. I'm gonna go for a fully custom shape for this one. It's going to be a fairly meaty sort of headed bar. Nice and big, so that I've got plenty of room to work with in resizing it. When it actually comes to attaching it to the robot. I'm going to give that a little bit more, and I'm actually going to... Will I? Seems actually potentially risky. This is supposed to hit from both sides, so... No, I won't do anything fancy with the shape, because as I say, it's meant to hit with both sides. It's a reversible weapon. And so I want it to be able to Yeah, I want it to be able to do that hit with both sides with equal force, yeah, equal effectiveness. I think I might actually, no, yeah, I'm going to make the chassis a little bit taller just so that I can get more of an angle, because that really isn't enough for what I'm going for here. If I get this really sort of right up at the very top of the chassis. And get that nice and low down. Just need to pull this back just a little bit, and then pull that up. Now I'm going to be giving it an axle that is actually part of the weapon. That does prevent certain problems, in that it does mean that the blur cylinder for this weapon is going to look very strange. But well, it's a choice between having the blur look strange and having the weapon itself just, you know, not quite have the weight and potentially not quite have the durability that you want it to. So that, I think, can actually get away with being a bit bigger. After all, this is supposed to be a reach bot. Now, right, how thick is that? That looks, yeah, that looks like that should be a solid bar. Make that steel. That weighs 17.5 kilos. That's, yeah, that's a heavy bar, but it's nothing ludicrous. Plenty of people have made far heavier than that with mixed success. And but it's also not too far on the light end. How thick can I get away with making the armour? No, not quite that thick. I'll leave it 5mm because I'm probably going to end up giving it some extra additions. Now, the most important thing. This is a twitchy bot after all. So it needs to be sufficiently purple. And it's probably easiest if I do this one based on the bigger section first. No, I need not 0.35. And if I set that to a... What happens if I make it a double throw toggle switch? Will that... Oh no, that's the space said. No. That's not what I want. Try the analog lever. Ooh, it even sounds good. Okay, it's a... Yeah, it spins a bit fast for its weight, but that can be changed with gearing. What I do want to do is reverse the direction so that it spins in the direction of the button that I'm holding, so that it's easier to establish what you want to actually do with it. Now, it's a bit heavy, it's producing way too much momentum, so I'm going to thin it down a bit. That's made it, what now, 10.5 kilos. It can get away with being longer. And I'm also going to change the gearbox. Okay, no, yeah, that's entirely the wrong way to change the gearbox. I may, ever so slightly, have made Apex, I don't know, Apex the next generation? Yeah, Apex the Empire Strikes Back? No, that was Apex 3 that did that. So what would it be? I don't know. But anyway, yeah, this weapon is a little bit too heavy. Just a bit. Right, seriously, if I spawn in a crate... Yeah, that's too much. On the plus side, it has established that it can right itself, which is handy. And it does certainly have reach. It just doesn't have much stability. And weapon impacts on the floor do damage the weapon. Although at least it can stop its weapon quickly, thanks to being geared. Yeah, this... Well, thinking about it, the robot is quite light at the moment. So I'll leave it for now, as the weapon is. And get on with giving it a bit more heft to throw around. Oop. Before I forget. Take half sphere, flip it upside down, make it nice and small, turn it into polycarbonate, and you've got yourself a caster. That's it, 0.1 and 0.3. Yeah, just a little handy thing. Casters are always useful. Those are a bit too big though. But yeah, it just should make it a little better able to maneuver, especially if I then improve the gear ratios on the motors. After all, one of this robot's primary attributes is supposed to be mobility. Oh, okay. That's bad. Okay, stop. Come on, get back up. So self-righting is at least a viable option. Other things may need work. Also, I'm going to increase the size of those again because I don't think they were quite hitting the floor properly. And I am going to go ahead and lighten the bar some more because that is a bit ridiculous. That should be about solid. It's now fairly mobile. It's nothing amazing, but it is reasonably so. Weapon still throws it around, but not as much. And the weapon still has the reach it was intended to have. Yeah, it's a pretty big circle of no fun zone for the opponent. Now, to demonstrate what I was actually doing with this cube before I got distracted by casters. Which is, stick it there, rotate it. What am I looking at? 20 to 10. So I want 18, 17? 17, that's the one. And make that 29. 28.5. Yeah, 29. Guess we want a nice, beefy, defensive wedge on the back here that can potentially be used to shove opponents up into the weapon. After all, defense and control are the secondary priorities. So that there, that's going to be a nice green. I'm just gonna get a wedge on the end of that to actually get under opponents. And what's this one? That's that one. So just turn that into a 1. Five. And then raise that up to meet the rest of the wedge. those in steel. Get them in, what was that? It was 3, 5. And okay, that looks too low. Gonna have to cut that one down to 1. But that wedge should... Okay, it's not gonna work on a crate with no real ground clearance. But against an actual robot, it should potentially be able to deflect rear threats up into the weapon. And then forward threats can just take the hit from the weapon straight to the face. The manoeuvrability is alright when the weapon isn't running, and when the weapon is already up to speed. It's that midpoint when things aren't so good. Just one potential avenue of attack there. Hit with one side, it hit from one side with the weapon, and then hit from the other side. And the question now is how to improve traction, because it's not so much torque that it's struggling with, it's just traction. And I think probably the best thing to do there will just be to increase the thickness of the frontal armour by quite a lot. After all, I've still got plenty of weight to play with. Get the top nice and heavy as well. That just increased the weight everywhere. I think 110 should do it. Okay. It's alright, but could the mobility be better? This looks like reasonable mobility. Doesn't drop too much when the weapon is active. It's actually more mobile going backwards than it is forwards. And that weapon changes direction seriously fast. That's going to be good for adaptability and potentially for control of the opponent. Just pull that back in slightly after all, because it is not quite attached to the robot. There we go. And now I always exit to workshop just in case, because it seems like it saves more reliably when you do that than when you exit straight to menu. And now it is time for the Twitchinator to have its inaugural battle. It's very easy to build robots a hell of a lot smaller than you intended. Come on. Get him. Okay. Come on. Come on. Come on. I don't have the power to use the wedge. I've got the weapon power though. Get off. Come on, get back up. Okay, so it can provably self-right in a combat situation. Okay, the weapon is actually quite handy to use to aid mobility by actually steering with it. That's good to know. Like, if I want to turn right, like if I'm running away and I want to turn around, I can rotate the robot much faster if I spin the weapon the opposite way to the way that I want to turn. It's not... Well, it's not quite as manoeuvrable as I'd been hoping, but it certainly did have range, especially for its size. It defended very well against against Royal Robbie there. Let's try something with a flipper. Yes, I do have a lot of robots in the workshop there, but none of them are the subject of this video. And defensive spinner use. Get me off the wall. Turn towards him with the spinner. And he is already out of gas. Because the AI flips far too often. But... okay, that rear wedge is actually quite effective against his wedge. That's good to know. Okay, so against opponents with a lot of pushing power and a bit of frontal ground clearance, it may actually be a viable option to use that rear wedge more to sort of draw them on. Come on, get free. And it is looking to be fairly difficult to actually attack the Twitchinator, because it's just so good at shaking itself off you. I might actually have managed to create a good robot here. Well, let's see what anyone who watches the video thinks. And one final fight, just to check that this is actually reasonably versatile. I'm going to go against... what do I want to go? I'm going to go against actually made this robot, Pain Wheel, in the first build that I got hold of, basically just as a opponent with a spinner to fight. But it actually turned out to be, well, the weapon isn't very practical, but the robot turned out to be somewhat difficult to attack. Although, not even slightly difficult for the Twitchinator to attack, apparently. So that's handy to know. Yeah, that's fast. That was a fast win. That is a powerful bar. Okay. So, in conclusion, I'm not entirely certain that I managed to stick rigidly to the design priorities, but I have produced what seems to be quite an effective robot. It's very difficult to actually push around by the look of things. I would try fighting against it with some robots, but the way that the weapon works, the AI can't yet be, or at least not with my level of knowledge, made to know how to use the weapon with its current controls. But based on the opponents that I fought, it does seem hard to push around, and that weapon can do a lot of damage. I hope that I've done Twitchy proud here and made an effective robot. And, well, with that, goodbye.